Hey everyone, I'm Tiana and this is the June 27th edition of In the Know. If you're like me, you may have settled into the pandemic rhythm and felt a little lulled by it. It's kind of like getting in a hammock. And then once you're in, it's kind of hard and awkward to get out. It might be embarrassing, you might fall on your face. Well, allow me to be that hand helping you get out of the pandemic and let you know how we're gonna re-engage and restart here at SBC. All right, forgive my looking down at my screen a lot here today, but there's a lot of information and I want to get those details correct to you guys. So this week we expect that we will be moving into step 3 of the BC Restart Plan. What that means for Sunday morning gatherings is more people, but still some safety protocols in place. We don't know the exact details of the numbers or the protocols yet, but we are planning to do a live in-person service with people on the stage doing live music and speaking. We may or may not be able to sing along with them, but that's starting this week, Sunday, July 4th. It's gonna be live streamed just like we used to do back in the olden days. And guess what? The nursery is gonna be open. All other SBC kids areas are gonna gradually reopen very soon as we are able to do so. This sounds really close to normal. So close, but we really need you guys still to register online to come to those services, and we're only going to be doing one at 9 a.m. for the time being. This is going to be our plan moving forward until we hit capacity, and then we will open an 11 o'clock service. As we know more, we will be updating the SBC reopening plan on our website as soon as we can when we have that information. And now I'm going to tell you what we have going on this summer for kids and youth. If your kid is going into elementary school next year, we've got a day camp running 4 days a week. If they're going into middle school, we have a day camp on Tuesday afternoons from 2 to 5 and our Impact Youth Night on Thursday nights from 7 to 9. If your youth is going into high school, we have our Ignite Youth Night on Friday nights. All the dates and details are on our website on the appropriate ministries tab, as well as registration for those. So check them out. We can't wait to hang out with your kids. This week, we are going to be sending out a survey. If you are in our database, you'll get an email with a link to do that survey. And if you don't get an email on this next week, you can still find that survey on our website. We encourage everyone connected with SBC to go ahead and have each adult in your home fill out that survey. We really want to understand what your church life rhythms have been like over this last year and what your hopes are for church and connection moving forward. Today, we have a panel of experts who specialize in post-pandemic re-engagement and how we recover from that. Just kidding. Well, not about the panel and not about them being excellent in their fields, but the truth is, even our experts are realitating the current situation as pioneers. And so we've asked those we think can give us some great wisdom and advice about finding health and connection post-pandemic to join us this Sunday morning. We've got our very own Lee Young, Steph Erdt, Bryn Bentham, and Tracey Bennett with us today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. As a staff, we've been putting a lot of time and energy and prayer into how we can best encourage you all and help us all reconnect, and we've got a few ideas coming down the pipe. You guys have heard about the patio that we've got opening up on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. to connect with our staff and whoever else shows up with their drink in hand. Starting next Sunday, July 4th in the evening, we've got an informal gathering beginning at 6 p.m. at Powell Beach for just whoever wants to show up and likes the beach and likes to hang out with people. We don't have a catchy title for it probably because Dell's on holidays, but he'll probably be there hanging out. So you should join us on Sundays, moving forward, 6 p.m. Powell Beach. I hope this has given you guys a bit of clarity and courage to get out of your pandemic hammock. That's kind of catchy. Maybe not. But now we've got a special announcement from our leadership board.
Hi SBC, it's Kate from the leadership board. I just wanted to take a moment and deliver a little message about a future meeting we have coming up. And as much as it's a future meeting, it should have happened so long ago. But with COVID restrictions easing, we will be holding the special members meeting July 11th from 7 until 9. Previously, we had this meeting scheduled November 19th, but due to provincial health regulations, we had to shut it down. So thank you for your patience through all of these COVID restrictions. But we're going to be able to fulfill that special members meeting Sunday, July 11th, 7 to 9. Put it on your calendar, and we look forward to seeing you then.
All right, I know there was a lot of details and things to take in here, but check out our website and give us a call even if you need more clarity, because we'd love for all of you guys to be in the know.
Well, today's Grad Recognition Sunday, and it's one of my favorite Sundays of the year. And it's really marking those transition from high school and into, well, adulthood. And it's a big deal. And I always takes me back to when I graduated, and I'm sure it does for you as well. And just thinking of all the different paths that my friends took, going from high school, some to university, some to Bible college, some out to the workforce. Some of them have had 3 careers since then. And I think of all of the transitions and the milestones that we have in our lives, this is one of those big ones. And so it's great to pause and just recognize our high school grads every year. Now, we support our grads in a variety of different ways. We have bursaries here at the Church for Christian Education. We also have bursaries through the school that goes towards university or tech or what other kind of education they would go through. We also have these prayer cards, and I want to show these because these are really a highlight for us in that each of the prayer cards talks about each student, where they're going, what their plans are for the future. It allows us to pray for them throughout the entire year. You stick them out on the fridge or you put them, on the bathroom mirror or wherever you need to be reminded of, that's right, I'm going to regularly pray for the grad that I've chosen. Or maybe you take one of each. Everybody's a little bit different. The biggest thing I want us to talk about this year, and I've mentioned it a couple times, is this idea of reconnection. Now, as we're coming out of pandemic, we want to reconnect and reform community again. And I think our grads going through this major transition, they've come through a really hard last high school year. Grade 12 was not what they expected. I think more than ever, our grads are going to need our support as they transition into this next thing of life. And so these prayer cards allow you to sponsor a kid. Maybe you want to send them a care package. Maybe you want to send them words of encouragement. But that connection that's year-long is the most valuable thing that we can do in supporting our grads. Bursaries are great, gifts are great. We handed out, and you'll see Dustin and Tiana handing out some Bibles and some resources for parents to our grads. Those are great, but those are just like little one-off things. The ongoing relational support that we can give our grads in prayer, in support, in gifts, in encouragements, phone calls, letters, emails, whatever we can do to just stay connected with our grads as they go through this transition, that's the biggest thing. I've talked with a few grads over the years, and that's the one thing that keeps coming back as been the most impactful, was when people from our church reached out to them during the year. Not so much the gift, not so much anything else, but reached out during the year and connected with them. And when I talked to other grads that felt maybe a little less supported or felt disconnected, they didn't have that experience. That was the common denominator of a good experience or a bad, was the reaching out and the mentorship that we can provide. At least if you take one of these cards, you can be praying for them. I think at best, we want to be connecting with each one of our grads throughout the entire year. And again, I would say phone calls and gift packages. I remember getting care packages when I was in college. It was a big deal. So I would encourage all of us to do that and connect with our grads well this year.
Thank you. All right, quick dawdling.
What kind of knock is that? Hi! You graduated!
I guess.
It'll be good whenever you pick it up, if you decide now or in 10 years.
I like it.
I'm not. Unscathed.
Tuna fries and a side of Zach Keckley. We dropped off your gift at your house, so you weren't there.
We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord. We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the how to hold our differences and live in one accord. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. Give us ears for the hurting, give us eyes for a need. Give us ears for the hurting, give us eyes for a need. Show us how to serve our neighbor, a friend or enemy. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. We will walk with each other, we will walk side by side. We will walk with each other, we will walk side by side. And we'll bear each other's burdens with Jesus as our guide. And they'll know we are Christians by His love, by His love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by His love. We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord. We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord. Teach us how to hold our differences and live in one accord. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they know we are Christians by our love. Give us ears for the hurting, give us eyes for a need. Give us ears for the hurting, give us eyes for a need. Show us how to serve our neighbor, a friend or enemy. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. We will walk with each other, we will walk side by side. We will walk with each other, we will walk side by side. And we'll bear each other's burdens with Jesus as our guide. And they'll know we are Christians by His love, by His love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by His love. And they'll know we are Christians by His love, by His love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by His love. His love, His love, His love, His love. God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you. You're where my help comes Give me wisdom, for you know just what to do. And I will love you, Lord, my strength. And I will love you, Lord, my shield. And I will love you, Lord, my rock. Forever all my days, I will love you, God. God, I look to you, I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you, you're where my help comes from. Give me wisdom, for you know just what to do. And I will love you, Lord, my strength. And I will love you, Lord, my shield. And I will love you, Lord, my rock. Forever all my days, I will love you, God. Hallelujah, our God reigns. Hallelujah, our God reigns. Hallelujah, our God reigns. Forever all my days. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, our God reigns. Hallelujah, our God reigns. Hallelujah, our God reigns. Forever all my days. Hallelujah. I will love you, Lord, my strength. And I will love you, Lord, my shield. And I will love you, Lord, my rock. Forever all my days, I will love you, God. I will love you, God. I will love you, God.
What is this?
You are gonna pray in here.
I've already been praying in here.
Hey? Alright.
Okay. So Brad showed up here in my office, here in the youth office, and we're just going to pray in here. So you're joining me in my office to pray this morning. So as we all feel the excitement and hope of things starting to shift with COVID and regulations starting to change, as we think back to the past year and the challenges that it's been for all of us, and even a lot of the hard news we've had to hear over the months that has been filled with grief, struggle, and each one of us having our own stories of loss. I've just kind of felt drawn to this one prayer, and it's called the Liturgy for Embracing Both Joy and Sorrow. Seemed applicable for where we're at right now. So maybe just take a minute, if you can, to create some quiet. so that you can focus on the words. Do not be distant, O Lord, lest I find this burden of loss too heavy and shrink from the necessary experience of my grief. Do not be distant, O Lord, lest I become so mired in yesterday's hurts that I might miss entirely the living gifts this day might hold. Let me neither ignore my pain, pretending all is okay when it isn't, nor coddle and magnify my pain, so that I dull my capacity to experience all that remains good in this life. For joy that denies sorrow is neither hard-won, nor true, nor eternal. It is not real joy at all. And sorrow that refuses to make space for the return of joy and hope, in the end becomes nothing more than a temple for the worship of my own woundedness. So give me strength, O God, to feel this grief deeply, never to hide my heart from it, and give me also hope enough to remain open to surprising encounters with joy, as one on a woodland path might stumble suddenly into dapplings of golden light. Amidst the pain that lauds these days, give me courage, O Lord, courage to live them fully, to love and to allow myself to be loved, to remember, grieve, and honor what was, to live with thanksgiving in what is, and to invest in the hope of what will be. Be at work gilding these long heartbreaks with the advent of new joys, good friendships, true fellowships, unexpected delights. Remind me again and again of your goodness, your presence, your promises. For this is who we are, a people of the promise, a people shaped in the image of the God whose very being generates all joy in the universe, yet who also weeps and grieves its brokenness. So we, your children, are also at liberty to lament our losses, even as we simultaneously rejoice in the hope of their coming restoration. Let me learn now, O Lord, to do this as naturally as the inhale and exhale of a single breath. To breathe out sorrow, to breathe in joy, to breathe out lament, to breathe in hope, to breathe out pain, to breathe in comfort, to breathe out sorrow, to breathe in joy. In one hand, I grasp the burden of my grief, while with the other, I reach for the hope of grief's redemption. And here, between the tension of the two, between what was and what will be, in the very is of now, let my heart be surprised by, shaped by, warmed by, remade by the same joy that forever wells within and radiates from your heart, O God. Amen.
Well, welcome SBC to our panel discussion for June, and I'm excited for today's panel. It's going in a different direction. I had originally planned to talk about where do we see SBC going next, but in having conversations over the last month and a half or so, and realizing that the time of the COVID pandemic is winding down, I've heard variety of responses of how people are feeling, what they're looking forward to, what they're nervous about as the pandemic comes to a close and as we re-engage back into community. I recognize that there's probably needs to be a discussion around expectation and a discussion really about that it's not going to just be as simple as one day the church is closed and the next it's open and we're back to normal. It's going to be a process, and it's going to take a longer probably than any of us really expect.
And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to gather some, I guess, quote unquote, experts in the field, but really what experts ultimately mean is people who like to thoughtfully engage in good conversation or thoughtfully engage in great questions and really see how people are feeling. And so counselors come to mind. And I was thinking in my life and the people that I've talked to, whether it's here in the church or in my own personal life, who are the people I go to for counseling? Here they are. This is fantastic. Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate taking the time. So why don't we just start by introducing yourselves, because I think for the most part there'll be lots that will know who all of you are, but there will be some that have no idea who you are. So I think if we just kind of go one by one, just introduce yourself, just give a very small piece of context of who you are, what you do, and how maybe you're connected here at SBC, and that would be a great place to start. So Tracey, why don't we start with you?
Hello, my name is Tracey Bennett. I am a social worker and also part-time professor with a couple of universities here. I founded Stillwaters, which is the counselling centre connected to SBC, so that is my link here. And I know many of you in the community, and yes, my delight to be here today. Thank you.
And I'm Stephanie Erdt. I have been attending Summerland Baptist since I was a little girl and had the opportunity to be on staff for 17 years. And also have had the opportunity to work as a counselor for a few years. And so, yeah, that's my connection. Thank you.
And I'm Bryn Bentham, and I'm a naturopathic doctor by trade, and my practice is here in Summerland. And we have lived in Summerland since 2012, and Chelsea and I have been attending here regularly since then. And you may have seen us on stage doing music over the years, or I played guitar in some different worship teams. So yeah, that's my connection. Been a part of the church for a while.
What I think is great is that all of you are bringing a bit of a different perspective just because of what you do professionally, but at the same time, have a great connection here at SBC in different ways. And Steph, what you didn't say was that you're also on our deacons board. So you're on one of our boards, and it's just great to even have board representation as we have these discussions. And again, as a reminder to our church, the deacons board is there to pray with and to talk with, and when we need help or you need engagement or you just want to take conversations further, our deacons board, that they would love to do that. They are essentially lay pastors of our church, and so it is they all often call it the right arm of the lead pastor of all those pastoral and spiritual care within our church. That's the deacons board, and Steph is a part of that, and we're excited to have her as a part of that. So let's get into some of our questions and start working some of this through. So, how do we respond typically to stress or trauma? And what are some examples that we maybe could potentially see as we re-engage back into community? The pandemic has caused some stress and some trauma, so it'd be first, I think, good to understand what is the definition, and then what are maybe some examples that we could see as we re-engage?
Yeah, good question. I was thinking about that, and we have been in a pandemic where we've been in isolation, and isolating can be one of the ways that people respond to stress or trauma, and we probably aren't going to recognize that unless we're tuned in to people that we're close with. And people tend to isolate or withdraw or, push people away, potentially become less active, have negative coping mechanisms, step into old patterns of behavior that are unhealthy, maybe addictions. Maybe you notice people you're close with are a little bit more impatient, quick to anger, and maybe also increased anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I would concur with Steph. Certainly in my clinical practice, what I've actually seen is a rise in the levels of anxiety and depression. So people that have been struggling with, relative mental health issues and psychological issues, those things have actually been exacerbated. So don't be surprised if you've seen that, and again, it's just having some understanding about what's going on for people. And like you said, Lee, we all cope differently. We've all been affected differently, and there's a whole spectrum across the board where people have been struggling and trying to cope.
Yeah, when I think of stress, sort of the way my sort of training has oriented me, is it's a physiologic sort of response in your body to either a real or perceived threat. So there's this hormone cascade starts going that sort of enables you to focus on the right now, like fighting, fleeing, or freezing. And it enables you to make very quick decisions about surviving right now, but it's not the best state to be making like long-term bigger decisions, because when you're operating in that sort of spin, it can be difficult to sort of understand outside of like what's going to get me into the next 1 hour of being alive. So, and obviously, you know, for most people, the stress encountered during the pandemic wasn't like immediate death, but it can still put you into that state at various points. So yeah, that would be maybe one little piece I'd add, is just thinking about decision making when you're in a stressed out state versus the other physiologic state, which is sort of rest, digest, heal. So, and in that place, I feel like you can make a lot sort of better decisions about longer term sort of plans.
You know, like even as I hear all of those answers, some of the practical examples of, you know, you feel that stress and that rise of anxiety, the things that were already there, everyone responds to that stress and anxiety different. Like you said, like there's the flight, or you freeze, right? And so that becomes more common, right? And so then if you find yourself, normally you like to go out and be a part of things, but you find yourself not wanting to ever re-engage in anything, that should be a red flag, right? If you're finding that you're fighting and you're angry all the time and everything is an argument, well, that should be a red flag, right? Like there's like just knowing kind of who you are and how you respond to some stress and anxiety. I think especially as we pivot again, because we've kind of been in a normal rhythm for the last 6 months. It's been isolating, but at least there's been a rhythm. We're about to change rhythm again. And that in itself causes some stress and anxiety, even if it's good, even if it's stepping into a good place, right? So I appreciate that. That's nice, well-rounded. That's great. You know, the pandemic has been experienced differently by everyone, and personal experience often really, well, it is the glasses that we look through. Our worldview is shaped by our experience, right? So for some, COVID was a much needed break. For other people, life sped up because of something. Some people experienced financial difficulty. Others had a business boom. So everyone is experiencing the pandemic very differently. And so the lens in which they are looking through is different then as we step back into reinforming our community. So how do we manage all these different expectations? Because depending on where you're coming from out of the pandemic, you could have different expectations of what church is going to look like, what re-engaging in old friendships is going to look like, what does the workspace even look like? How do we manage all those different expectations and reforming and re-engaging in community?
Yeah, and I think there are a load of really good questions there. And I think moving forward, again, just hooking into what we've just talked about, that really does segue in, is us thinking about the stresses that people have been through. And if you do a little bit of reading about post-pandemic, you know, experiences during pandemic times, you'll see the psychology really touches on two areas. The first area is labeled traumatic stressors versus generic stressors. So you know what, we've all been in this kind of pandemic state and we've experienced it, and it has been generically stressful for the majority of people. And again, that's measured on a spectrum. For other people, they've been through what's called traumatic stressors. Now, that really refers to people that may have been ill themselves with COVID. They may have had somebody very close to them who've been very sick with COVID, and there's a real threat there. They may have experienced, loss of income, and it's really impacted, their household living. So for them, it's been a very traumatic experience. And I think as a church, we have to sit back and recognize that whilst our experience is our experience, and we may have gotten through, that is not necessarily the case for others around us. So it's very important as we move forward to take time, to take space, to learn, to listen to each other, to be very graceful and kind. And I do like that, you know, the saying of be kind with Bonnie Henry. You know, I think that's always an important factor to remember. And I think, you know, as we reintegrate and as we step back into community, we have to remember there's a journey. There's been a journey into the pandemic, and there's a journey, you know, coming outside of the pandemic. And we're all going to do that at a different pace, and that is okay.
Yeah, I agree. I also think of, you know, how were we doing pre-pandemic, and that also affects how we were able to handle the pandemic. If we were in a difficult place prior to that, then, you know, maybe that just heightened all of our mental health issues as well. Transition is hard for some people. Some people are ready to jump back in with both feet and let's get going. And some people, you know, are really reserved, and transition takes time. So yeah, like you said, being patient, having grace with people, and just that understanding that we all do handle it very differently.
Yeah, so you mentioned transition. So obviously that's what we're sort of talking through. And sometimes we choose transitions, like maybe we're at a place in our life where we're ready to make some sort of a change, and then sometimes transitions are sort of thrust on us. And this sort of fits more in that category. But I think sort of having some closure on one thing can be really helpful before moving on to another. And I don't know what that might look like here, whether there is some sort of almost like ceremony, whether it's like a ceremonial mask burning, and not from like a anti-mask sort of like stick it to the man, but more like literally just having sort of an intentional time where people can share their experience and sort of like close that chapter before just sort of moving on. Because sometimes people, whether it's, I don't know, like maybe in relationships, someone might jump into a new relationship before sort of dealing with something that came up in a previous one, and that same stuff's going to keep kind of rearing its head. So on transitions, I think that maybe it would be a helpful thing to consider doing some sort of like, you know, COVID, you know, funeral, not for, you know, for the whole experience, to put a bookend on it. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just add in? I think just on a clinical note, it's always good to just do a bit of a self-check-in, you know. And when I've worked with people who've really been quite hard hit by COVID, especially with the work that I've been doing in the UK, where unfortunately people have been very badly affected, you know, I've really focused on the grieving model, which can be helpful. So, you know, when you think about grieving, we think about the stages of grief. And, you know, the first stage is kind of like denial. The second stage can be anger. The third stage is bargaining. The fourth stage is depression. And the fifth stage is acceptance. And you can hop between the stages, right? But it's really good if you can just sit there and think about the pandemic. Where am I in relation to those stages? Am I good? Am I accepting? Or am I stuck? Are you stuck in anger? Are you really resentful? If you are, and you're really struggling in those areas, then talk to your friends, talk to your family. If that still is not helping you and you do find yourself stuck, then reach out to somebody. Reach out to Stephanie, to Bryn, to myself, to Stillwaters, anybody professional that can help you get unstuck.
Yeah, and I think that is really helpful, because as we reform and re-engage in community, we might all be in some of those different stages. And so some people have got to acceptance and can't have a hard time realizing that, well, why can't you just be accepting? Like I've worked it all through, how come you haven't? Right? And being patient and being kind, like even as you were talking, I was reminded of just the fruits of the Spirit of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, goodness, right? Like even self-control of like, sometimes it's just better to listen and not respond with the first thing that comes to my head. Like oftentimes we think self-control, maybe even from a sexual place, but self-control of speech, even when we're trying to just be gentle and patient and reforming into community again, it's going to take some self-control this is going to take a minute to kind of go through all of those things. And again, this is where I get impatient. I know my own mind a little bit of like, I got there quick And so why can't everyone else? Like, what's your hang up? Like, just deal with it. Let's move on. And need to be patient. Go ahead, Steph.
No, I agree. And I think it's really wise for us to, see how somebody's acting. And although it feels personal, to remember that this feels personal, but it's probably not. And, just be curious and ask questions. And also, it reminds me of a song that's called Give Me Your Eyes. And the idea behind that is for us to see people the way Christ does. And I think, if we really take that perspective, then we do have more understanding of what people are going through or where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's awesome. One of the verses that comes up, or passages that come up when I think of fruits of the Spirit and being gentle and kind, is also Ephesians 4. So it says, I urge you to live the life worthy of the calling you've received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient and bear with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. So when we think of unity, not necessarily as always agreeing, but also something that we strive for and something that we're actually called to as followers of Christ. And as we are unified through Christ, through the Spirit, we are unified. Whether we want to be unified or not, we are. If the Spirit is in us, we are unified into one body. But we can find ourselves in disagreement. We can find ourselves in different places. We can find ourselves in a disharmony or out of sync with each other. So with that idea of not agreeing, but seeing ourselves inside of maybe a larger sphere that has room for differences, unity doesn't always mean getting everyone back on the same page. So every church is re-engaging back into ministry differently, and this includes SBC. We have our own kind of re-entry timing, and it's going to be different than Julia Street. It's going to be different than the Alliance Church, which is going to be different than Trinity in Kelowna, which is going to be different than Willow Park. It's going to be different than the churches down in Vancouver and the ones in Alberta. We're all different, and we're all part of a unity and a body of believers, but we're all going to face this a little bit uniquely, right? So understanding that, how do we move forward and re-engage in unity and harmony, but still kind of living with the tension or the potential disagreement on the process? Bryn?
Yeah, I think there's the potential for an extra layer of complexity when you're talking about a church environment. Most of my life is either in my sort of secular work or at the dance studio, where you come up with a plan or an idea and you just kind of go for it. Whereas in an organization like a church, yeah, you still need to kind of think strategically and come up with ideas and vision and whatnot. But there's this extra layer of sometimes people's spirituality and beliefs getting kind of thrown into the mix too. And sometimes someone might have an opinion or a thought, and it gets conflated with, well, God told me this is the way to go. And you might also end up with someone with the exact opposite strategy or idea, but the same posture of, well, God's telling me this is the direction we need to go. So I think that's unique in church environments. And I don't know that I have the solution for that, other than I think if you're focusing on the content of the strategy, or whether it's a doctrine or something where people have differences of opinion, I think that is very difficult to expect everyone to agree. But I would suggest that there can be a posture of openness or a posture of integration, as opposed to like an oppositional, this is what I think, this is what you think, and you're wrong and I'm right. That sort of an more of an arrogant or sort of oppositional posture to other, as opposed to perhaps more of like a humble or integrative, like, okay, well, your opinion represents a very important element that we need to consider, and so does this. And so as we come up with some sort of direction, it needs to honor both of those perspectives. So that would probably be my take on that.
You guys?
Yeah. I think of, cognitive behavioral therapy in that, and, how we think affects how we feel, affects how we behave, and what that looks like. So what we're thinking about is going to affect how we're feeling, is going to affect our actions. So I think we need to be very intentional on how we're communicating with other people and being active listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both Bryn and Steph. I think being respectful and taking time to listen to people and be honoring, and value what they're saying rather than push it and react. I've actually been doing quite a bit of reading in this area theologically and just in my work with pastors all over the world, really, and had lots of really good conversations. And I'm not saying I have the answer, because I do not.
Shoot.
But the common theme seems to be, which I love actually, and I think you can actually apply this to any tough thing that a church has been through. And it really is, the first thing is to always be Christ-centered. Whatever you're going through, you need to be Christ-centered, missional-focused, and gospel-led. Okay, so that's the first stage. The second stage is to be people-focused, actually. And whilst we've, previously you might have had lots of programs running, and I know this has been an awesome church and is an awesome church, very involved in the community, but things have changed. And it's, I do believe, and in my reading, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that out of tough times, and I'm talking about plagues, I'm talking about really hard experiences, that history rises up, that actually a richness can come. We can learn new things. We can do things in different ways. So I think that's awesome. So that's the positive to pull out of this whole experience, I feel. The third thing is actually to start small, for SBC, to start small. And from that, it's like sowing a seed, we grow the plant from the seed. And it takes time, and it takes nurturing. And that's okay. So be patient. And that hooks into your fruits of the Spirit, right? And the fourth thing is, to be adaptable. It's really important to be adaptable. And again, we might have done things in a certain way, and a church might have done things in a certain way. But it's okay to do it a little bit differently. And there will be some things that will just be done as they were, as you find your feet and we all recover. But there'll be other things that will be done slightly differently, and that is okay. We live in a very fast-paced, changing culture.
Well, and again, as I'm listening to all of you, the three things that jump out to me is humble, gentle, and patient. If we can be those, I can't be all of the fruits of the Spirit, right? I'm working on a few things, but if I can kind of focus on God, help me be humble, help me be patient, right? Help me be gentle. Then we should be able to navigate together moving forward. I like the start small idea, especially when we're talking about unity, because I think that's where that disharmony can come from, of some people are racing out ahead and other people aren't quite ready to step yet. And so then if you start really big, it can just get discombobulated in a hurry. And not everybody is quite ready to engage, and to start big takes a lot of people. So if you start small, then everyone can kind of start engaging at the pace that they want. And then from there, will be interesting to see where God leads us, because I love kind of the throw to history a little bit of, as we look at history and all those difficult times, whether it's pandemic, things like plagues, etc., or if it's persecution with the church always has this huge growth period, and not just numbers, but depth of understanding and a togetherness that often gets talked about as revival, right? A revival of spirit, a revival of discipleship. And so I'm curious to see, as we come out of kind of this time, and there's a reordering or a restructuring, or just we have to actually focus on how do we take the first step again, because we've been stopped. Maybe we start almost, as what Carolyn, one of our staff members, said, we originate back to the original. We just reinvent the original again, and going back, and what is discipleship, and what does it look like to follow Jesus, and what does it look like to do that together? And you start small and get led into a whole new direction that we never thought was possible, maybe. So I think there's lots of hope as we move forward. One of the things that we talked about, it's good to talk about some of these from a theory perspective, but sometimes you just need some practical things to step into it, some resources or some ideas or different things. I know we have some ideas as a church of how to just even engage in community, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I wondered if you guys had any resources that you thought would be helpful just to point people towards as far as, dealing with stress or dealing with even just the idea of re-engaging in harmony and in community, or one of the other things that we talked about was just even managing expectations. And so we've mentioned, I know Steph, you mentioned a couple resources, but what are some of the resources that you would maybe like to point people towards? And then what we'll do is we will put that information on our website so that you can then very quickly and easily go and see here are the resources that were mentioned in the panel. So you guys have any resources?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I would suggest that you contact Stillwater's Counselling. If you do find yourself in a bit of a tough spot, then please do reach out. And even if we can't help you as counsellors, we can signpost you to somebody or some resource that will help you. So please do reach out. That resource is for you.
Okay. I'll leave you with an image. How about that? Or a quip, a proverb of sorts. I actually don't know who said it, but I remember hearing it. And as I've been thinking about having this conversation, it's sort of been kind of playing in my mind. And it's something to the effect of, no woman or man stands in the same river twice, because the woman or man are different and the river is different. And I think oftentimes a common thing to say is, I want things to go back to how they were. But the reality is there is no moving backwards. Really, it's just sort of forwards. And that may have elements, but I think of that image of sort of a riverbed, and then there's the water that moves through it, and then there's the person standing in the water. And I sort of see the church as sort of the riverbed. It's the same structure that is now painted black back here, but for the most part is the same. But the river being sort of, the organization of it, it's different because, just like the water, it's come from a different amount, whatever. Point is, the institute, the people who are running it are different than they were 18 months ago. And every person coming to stand in the river will also be different. So I would just encourage you to sort of keep that image in mind when thinking about getting back to how things were, because that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, there's going to be a few resources, paper that you can print out that will be online that you can go through. And as Tracey said, resources like that can be provided by a counselor if people want to reach out to Stillwaters.
And I think as a church, what we want to do ultimately is we want to create space, especially as we talk about re-engagement and forming community again, especially in-person community. On one hand, the community has not stopped being a community, but at the same time, that whole in-person presence together stopped, right? So then we're reforming those relationships in person, face-to-face again. So we want to start small, just as we talked about. And so I know we're going to be starting a beach night on Sunday nights from 6 to 8, so just to meet down on one of the beaches, and there'll be information that'll come from that. And you heard about a little bit in our In the Know announcements today, so you can go back. If you didn't hear those announcements, just go back again and listen to some of those. We have the patio that we created out here, just in the parking lot, kind of not on the office door side, but actually where the garbage bins used to be. They're not there now. We did move the bins away so we could put nice tables and chairs and some umbrellas. And we've created a patio space, again, just for connections. So on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m., come and meet with us staff if you like, and just have some coffee and just a nice relaxed atmosphere. But we're also talking about potentially Thursday nights or Friday nights and having just an evening patio time, and potentially getting some food trucks from time to time and just hanging out on the patio and re-engaging in community. And so there'll be some other ideas that we'll have throughout the summer as we'll just start tossing out ideas of how else can we engage in our community. It doesn't have to be super formal. It doesn't have to be this big, huge event. A lot of times it's just organizing a space where we can gather together and start forming those conversations in community and those relationships again and get it started. And so that's what we're going to provide, is just space. And then in the midst of that, as we have conversations, if some of these resources, if counseling, or just even meeting regularly one-on-one with a friend, or engaging in a small group of people just to share how you're feeling and how you're doing, I think are all really helpful tips and ideas that you guys gave today. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and just talk through this a little bit. By no means did we solve everything, and that's not the intention. The intention is to really start the conversation, or at least be made aware of that the conversation is a little bit more complicated than just, let's just open up the door and we're back at it again. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's an impossible task. It's just taking those healthy steps forward and re-engaging together. So thank you guys for all of just your insight and your wisdom and your kindness as you guys talk. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. I want to close us in prayer. Thanks for joining us this morning here at SBC. And again, if you have any questions, if you need to reach out, you've got contact information for each of the panelists as well as for us here at the church. And if you don't have that information and you want it, please don't hesitate to contact us here at the church. We want to engage with you and talk with you and see all of us move forward together. So why don't we bow our heads and pray as we close our service today. Lord Jesus, we are grateful that you draw us together into family. By your Spirit, we are one. And we have that promise that we read in your word, that we are unified through the Spirit, and the Spirit is in each one of us. And so, Lord, I'm so grateful for that. As you continue to mold and shape us, as you see us grow, as you can see us as we fight through difficulties, and you give us the resources and the time and the people and the friends and the insight to move past it. I'm grateful that you would never leave us, you never forsake us, you're always there. We can rely on you. Even in those moments where you feel very far away, we know we can hold on to that promise that you are still there. And so, Lord, as we all navigate this kind of re-entry, post-pandemic world, there'll be some great joy, and I also know there will be some great stress. And in the midst of all of that, you will meet us, and you will be there, and we are so grateful for that. So, Lord Jesus, thank you for being with us today. Pray this in your name. Amen. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great week.